As a whistleblower, while I was serving under the command of Johan Booysen and Cato Manor unit, I witnessed certain atrocities committed.
You know, to see people being tortured in front of you is terrible, and I would try to make a change and to open his ears and say, hey, you know, this is wrong. But every door he knocked almost was closed.
Sad and heartbreaking to hear how he's been dragged through the mud. This honourable person, he's one of the most honourable people that I've met. And for his reputation to be thrown in the mud like that.
Aris and Shelley, I can feel your pain, and I can relate because I've been down that journey. You can see the hurt your partner's been through, and you in despair because you don't know how to help. And the only way is through the love that you have for him, and that's what propped you up, and your marriage, your family life.
I think that is hugely important. That is the telling of the story and the telling of the truth that is going to bring the freedom for you, Ari and Shelley.
Hi, I'm John Clark. I'm a social work consultant in private practice in Johannesburg, specialising in social justice and human rights advocacy for vulnerable people who have been pushed to the margins of society. Over the last 6 months or so, I've been working to provide professional psychosocial support for whistleblowers to share their stories. I've uploaded these conversations on my YouTube channel for the public to see and experience their narratives and the incredible difficulty and hardship that they have faced in the process of speaking truth to power. I'm calling this series of dialogues the Aletheia dialogues on truth-seeking by whistleblowers. And the word Aletheia means truth in ancient Greek, and it's usually translated as such, but it more strictly means an accurate perspective on reality. Well, today's dialogue is focused on how that truth reality is now finally being set free in the story of Aris and Shelley Ann Danikas, and how it is setting them free at the personal level, so that we in society might grapple with the startling revelations and truths which they are trying to mediate to a world which doesn't really want to hear it. But reality will set us free, but first it's going to make one miserable, angry, panicked and prone to denial. And most people who are watching this will know who Jacques Pauw is, and what happened to him 2 months ago when the truth finally caught up with him after he had filed a story with deliberate falsifications to try and explain why he was arrested and imprisoned overnight after a long afternoon of heavy drinking on the V&A waterfront. As a consequence, Daily Maverick severed their relationship with Jacques Pauw, and the media in South Africa has still not recovered and trying to come to terms with what happened. Anton Harber, the Caxton Professor of Journalism, described that as devastating and an appalling mess-up. He said on Twitter, "I struggle to think of a journalistic disaster more harmful than this one, and we have had a few competitors." Well, Jacques Pauw's book, The President's Keepers, has apparently notched up sales of over 200,000 copies. It's right up there, just below the Holy Bible, as the second best-selling non-fiction book in South African history. It was a book that brought the house down on Jacob Zuma's state capture conspiracy. So how could it be that such a man filed a fabricated story that accused the police of wrongfully arresting him and then detaining him for supposedly stealing his meal and a large 1,800 Rand bar tab from the Danikas restaurant on the V&A waterfront. Well, Daily Maverick's go-to scribe for collective narrative therapy, Richard Poplack, explained how the shipwreck happened in this article. Scotch on the rocks wasn't listed as one of the drinks on the bar tab. But Jacques Pauw's distinguished career certainly was. Richard explained what happened, but not why it happened. Well, the backstory is that Aris Danikas, knowing that I had set up my stall to offer psychosocial support to whistleblowers, approached me in late November last year to support him through the ordeal of lodging a complaint with the press ombudsman against the Daily Maverick for violations of the press code in an article written by Jacques Pauw, another which had significant fabrications. And it was about the internal politics of the National Prosecuting Authority, focused on trying to clear the way for General Johan Booysen, former commander of the notorious Cato Manor organised crime unit, to commence litigation against the state for his allegedly wrongful arrest. The falsehoods in that story were sourced from Johan Booysen himself, and Ari's name was mentioned as a one-time close friend of Johan Booysen and somebody who had left South Africa in 2008 and tried to blow the whistle on alleged police atrocities in the Cato Manor unit. Jacques failed to get hold of Aris and to interview him, and therefore had not given him a chance to reply. Well, the long backstory to all that is written up in this article titled Aris Danikas versus Johan Booysen, how Jacques Pauw and the Daily Maverick unwittingly zoomed history forward. In fact, I think it would be a good idea for people to pause this video and to read the article. The link is in the description below. It embeds 3 short videos. Well, let me play the first for you, which is the opening 10 minutes of the adjudication hearing.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pippa Green. I'm the Ombudsman. I'm joined by a panel, an adjudication panel of Joe Clolwe and Peter Mann, who will help in this adjudication. But the complaint that this arises out of is from an article in the Daily Maverick, headlined Confidential NPA Report which exposes senior officials who lied about Johan Booysen, yet they are still employed. The author of the article is Jacques Pauw. So thank you again for joining us.
What we need from you is a summary of all your complaints.
Thank you, Mr. Clolwe, for this. In clause 1, I said I'm lodging a complaint to the following parts of the article. A. The evidence of Danikas was crucial to the state's case. He's a Greek businessman and was a police reservist in Durban who worked with the Cato Manor unit. Booysen suspended him in 2008 for bringing police management into disrepute. He left the country overnight after allegedly stealing 300,000 from his business partner. What we have here is an introduction where, unfortunately, the writer of those so-called news is preparing his readers on an information which it's actually false and biased. There's no balance here. If you put those together, you have a Greek businessman who I'm dodgy because I alleged stole money from a business partner, and that I was suspended from the force and I ran away to Greece. That is the very first image that comes out on a reader's view. That is false. There were no evidence produced by Daily Maverick or Jacques Pauw to prove that I ever stole any money. I don't know where that came from. Well, I have my suspicions. I challenged Jacques Pauw to produce evidence that there is a judgment or there is a court case that I have been convicted of stealing 300,000 euro. My second complaint is close following an expose about the Cato Manor death squad in the Sunday Times in December 2011. the story was later withdrawn, and the arrest of Booysen and his men, Danikas, General Booysen and his men. This is factually inaccurate. I did not turn on Booysen and his men in 2011. As a whistleblower, while I was serving under the command of Johan Booysen and Cato Manor unit, I witnessed certain atrocities committed. I've tried in South Africa to approach Johan Booysen. I've tried to approach a list of other people that I felt close to and safe. That failed. As a result, I felt threatened. There were incidents happening in South Africa that made me feel that my life was in danger, and subsequently to that, I end up leaving the country in fear of my life. So, to state that Danikas General Booysen and his men after 2011, it's false. See, in a fraught effort to re-prosecute Booysen, Abraham sent Maiman and another advocate to Greece in January 2016 to consult with Danikas. They returned empty-handed, but, again, with an unsigned statement. So, now, this is false. The National Prosecution Authority came to Greece in 2016 to discuss, in the presence of my attorneys, the possibility of me testifying in court via video link and handed evidence on a case in South Africa. At the time, we agreed, I was happy to give evidence, and I handed over certain evidence to the investigation team. On that basis, an MLA mutual legal agreement was prepared, sent to Greece for me to sign. So I feel this is very inaccurate when the journalist states that they returned empty-handed with an unsigned statement. So we agreed, they went back to South Africa, they prepared the mutual legal agreement, and it was sent to Greece via the appropriate channels. Danikas had only signed a Greek version of his affidavit under the mutual legal assistance agreement between Greece and South Africa some 8 months after Abraham's re-prosecuted Booysen. He later refused to sign the English version because it contained mistakes. That is a blatant lie. That never happened. I have never refused to sign an English version. There are no evidence produced by the journalist to that extent. I produced emails proving that I was never asked to sign an English version. He says that I refused to sign an English version because it contained mistakes. That's a blatant lie. It never happened. Now, had I been asked for my version of story, I would have told Jacques that this is what happened, there's my evidence, and the story will reflect a more balanced news story. The De Kock panel says the state's reliance on Danikas' evidence is, open quote, puzzling, close quote, and it failed to understand why the state never translated the Greek version into English. I cannot answer for the De Kock report and the people behind it because, again, none of them contacted me to interview me. I mean, they all talk about my name, Ari Danikas, but none of them has ever reached through my attorneys, through the appropriate channels, or through me, to shine a light of what happened because I was directly involved with the prosecutors. On F, it has also emerged now that Danikas was never on the state witness list and Miami did not intend calling him. Pretoria attorney Julian Knight, acting for Danikas, said in a February 2015 affidavit that he had received an email from Miami in early 2015 stating that he will not be calling Danikas as a witness. The problem I have here is, Madam Chair, is that the journalist taking out of context information, puts it together in order to make his own news, which is inaccurate. Now, that letter was issued prior to 2016. It had nothing with the visit of the National Prosecution Authority in Greece in 2016, where for the very first time I agreed to sign a mutual legal agreement statement and to hand in officially evidence. So whatever transpired before that has nothing to do with the chain of events. By saying that Mayema did not intend calling him, it's a blatant lie. Mr. Mayema did not intend calling me to go back to South Africa to testify because I was fearing of my own safety. We had agreed by the attorneys and it was proposed by the NPA that I will testify by secure location in Europe, command post they call it, via video link. That was the arrangement. I have produced evidence to that. I have emails which I have produced to the panel that actually proves what I'm saying. He will not be calling Danikas a witness. It's another problem I have. I have voice recordings and I have emails, official emails from the National Prosecution Authority stating that they intended to call me as a witness. Had Jacques Pauw came to me and asked me, I would have given him that information. So it has happened in the past. It's a pattern repeated by not other than Johan Booysen, who is directly involved to damage my reputation. I'm not in South Africa to physically harm me. I'm in Greece, so it is a recorded academic study that a whistleblower that cannot be physically harmed, he will be character assassinated by media. And this is what I believe has happened right now with the South African media. I was never given the opportunity to respond. And the fact that Jacques Pauw states that he tried to contact me, it's a blatant lie. I was never contacted, and I believe that the intent was malicious not to contact me, and I have given the panel a lot of evidence to that extent.
Thank you. I think what is very important here, and I'm going to ask you to stay with me for a few minutes, is that we have to give some background. This event taking place. We have to give some background to who Mr. Danikas is. And I think it's very important for the panel to understand that this is a man who greatly assisted the state capture project in getting rid of KwaZulu-Natal Hawks Head General Johan Booysen. In order to protect cronies and business associates.
Can I interrupt, Madam?
Madam, I object.
Madam Chair, we are looking at a specific article, not a general picture of who Danikas is, who Booysen is, who Jacques Pauw is. We need to get focus on the article itself.
And Madam President, I may say that Jacques Pauw doesn't know of him, he's never spoken to me. How can he speak about a background about me if he's never spoken to me and interviewed me?
Well, as I said, you can read my full article to find out all the granular detail of what happened during the hearing and afterwards. In short, the Ombudsman made a finding in Aris' favour, and the Daily Maverick were obliged to publish a right to reply. And the hyperlink can be found as well in the description and the notes section below. Now, all that is history. Aris now feels vindicated, and this Aletheia dialogue introduces Aris and Shelley Ann, his wife, to the whistleblower community in South Africa so they can reflect on the experience that they've had to endure for the last 13 years since Aris left South Africa. Well, I've also invited another whistleblower friend of mine, Cynthia Stimpel, to join me in this dialogue, as well as a few other friends who will join in the gallery, so that Aris and Shelley know that it's not just me who has been inspired and encouraged by their extraordinary example of fortitude and resilience. Well, Cynthia has helped me get my bearings in this new field of practice, and the conversation I had with her in November last year is in the link above. And at the end of this video, you'll see a playlist on a growing collection of really inspiring stories of whistleblowers. Well, Cynthia?
And what brought me here today is just to interview a fellow whistleblower. I've been one too from South African Airways, and I fully understand the journey and the path we've walked. And so for me, I just feel gratitude to speak to another whistleblower and also to hear his story, because what I found from my own experience is that when you're able to speak about it, the healing starts, the vindication starts. And so it's really important for each whistleblower to have their voice.
And really the issue is, as much as it's important to know what's happened in the past, the question is, where are we going in the future, and how can we, as society at large, provide a supportive network and encouragement to people who have put themselves on the line, who've stuck their heads above the parapet, who are trying hard and to actually ensure that we cleanse the society of this contagion of corruption. Judge Zondo has very strongly said that the one outcome he wants from the Zondo Commission into state capture is that there will be a much easier time for whistleblowers. So with that framing, let's now ask Aris and Shelley, introduce yourselves.
My name is Danikas, and this is my wife, Shelley Ann Danikas. I read the article in my horror, and I've realized that there was a repeated pattern which I have dealt with and suffered over a period of 8 years. Regrettably, since 2013, when information came out of the media and leaked out that I was the Greek citizen that I was talking to the National Prosecution Authority regarding the Cato Manor case. At the time, there was this news coming out spontaneously, attacking my credibility, and this is what we called character assassination by media against whistleblowers. I could not stop it because I'm 15,000 kilometers away. I was a crucial witness for the prosecution. I was instructed not to speak to the media so we don't jeopardize the case. I had to ordeal those publications against me. So the recent one by Jacques Pauw at Daily Maverick, it was supposed to scrutinize the De Kock report.
Or shall I quickly explain it for people?
Yes.
De Kock was a prosecutor in the NPA, one of the senior people, and when Sharmila Batoyi took office as a new NDPP national director, she commissioned this report to decide whether or not to continue to pursue racketeering charges against General Johan Booysen and his men. And it goes back to 2013 when the first attempt to prosecute him commenced, and he has been fighting a battle with the support of the other accused to claim that those charges were invalid and that he was simply a victim of state capture and that he was going after Jacob Zuma's cronies, and therefore he was a target of that campaign and conspiracy. Aris was one of the sources for the Sunday Times articles that were written at the time in 2012, precipitated a whole inquiry. So with that background, you can understand why this is so important. And as I mentioned earlier, my article does fully explain all that detail. Okay, that
Thank
helps.
you, John. Yes, I didn't even understand what the De Kock report was. And here I am, my name and my judgment of character was negatively painted on the media. Yet I was never allowed to speak to the media. Nobody interviewed me. Nobody asked my opinion. So I understand my frustration and my sadness when I randomly come across publications about me when they've never ever spoken to me. That's actually sad. So there are two issues here. The one is the media and how the media works in South Africa to character assassinate and punish whistleblowers who come forward with a narrative that doesn't agree with the media's narrative. And the other issue is the Koch report, the NPA, and how they handle a witness and a whistleblower. In terms of Daily Maverick, when I read this article, the first thing I remember was that Jacques Pauw started his article with a paragraph that I will never forget. It was an introduction to prepare the readers so the whole picture, the way he writes it, I call it the power of the pen. As we get introduced to a narrative about a whistleblower, a character, in this particular situation was me. He was dodgy Greek businessman, fled the country, stole money, thrown out of the police force.
But let's go back and let me ask Shelley, you as the wife of a whistleblower have probably had to have that whistle blown in your ear and to the point where it's actually making your ears ring. Tell us a bit from your experience.
Okay, for sure. I met Ari, to be specific, on the 25th of February 2004. I met him at a club in Durban called Vakamata. And since that night, we have not separated, if I put it that way. We fell in love and we've been together ever since. And when I met him, he was a successful businessman. He only had his own business, Technotronics. He was also a reservist. He was very proud of his achievements. He was very respected member of his community and his Greek community, as well as the South African community. And then I met General Johan Booysen, his good friend, of which he became a very controlling member of our everyday. Slowly along the way, I started to witness atrocities, if I put it that way, of which he confided me to, what he was witnessing. It was very difficult for him, as it was for myself. He would be called out to crime scenes at 6 o'clock in the morning, come back with blood in his shirt. I would be very devastated, and it was a very difficult few years. But on the one hand, he was doing something to fight crime. He was passionate about it. He was doing something good for South Africa. Well done to him. On the other hand, when I started to hear the real truth of what was happening within this Cato Manor unit, things turned around very quickly. He tried to confide in respected members of the South African community, saying this is what's happening behind closed doors. Nothing or nobody seemed to want to get involved, to try and make a change, to let the truth come out. One night, I remember it was Easter, and Arthur, who's present on this conversation, he was there too, with his wife Nicole. We were good friends. They were called to a crime scene with Johan Booysen, who was also present, of which they witnessed man in a garage dying in front of them, and nothing was done to help these poor people. Maybe they did crime, but it doesn't mean that they had deserved to die.
So this was a suspect that they had been shot at this crime scene.
Yes, and there is a video. Yes, and there is a video showing it, and that's how I know the detail of it, because we watched the video when Johan, Atha, and Aris returned home on the night of our Greek Easter, and we were all in shock. This is what's happening, and the one lady who was present. I don't know if she was a lieutenant or
she was a captain.
A captain. She said in Afrikaans, stomp on zijn maag, stand on his stomach, basically, so he dies faster. And Ari was in a pole, and he was saying, "Director, we need an ambulance. We need an ambulance." And me watching this video was terrible. It was devastating. And Johan said to him, "The paramedics won't be allowed inside until he basically dies." Ari said to him, you know, that why wasn't the paramedics allowed inside? He said, no, these criminals don't deserve first-class treatment in a private hospital that the taxpayers are paying for. That was the message. And after we all viewed the video, he said, Johan said to Iris, "Get rid of it or you'll get in trouble." And we were all livid. And because Johan trusted us so much, to him it was just like, yes, okay, you're a pawn, you'll do what I do.
In order.
Do what needs to be done, that's it. He didn't think another wink. But on the other side of that, I was having sleepless nights. He was beginning to portray a picture that things had to change. And at that stage, we understood that within a period of time, we needed to leave.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you were very happy to see sacrifices being made and for you to be the loving, supportive wife, whilst Aris was genuinely on a mission for the common and social good.
Absolutely.
Then you came aware of the fact that this wasn't what Aris had signed up for, when he saw effectively crime being committed by the very policemen themselves.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
there was another incident. Tell us about that other incident.
I remember another specific incident, which Aris he'd taken a small video clip of a torture that had been that had taken place at the Cato Manor unit, and when he showed it to him, he chuckled, he giggled. That's how we get the job done. And then once again, get rid of it, and that's the end of it. He was very well aware what was going on within the unit, and that was just the way they accomplished their task. And I couldn't accept this as the way. It's very difficult. To see people being tortured in front of you is terrible. And I tried to make a change and to open his ears and say, hey, this is wrong. But every door he knocked almost was closed.
Cynthia?
Shelley, was that the turning point when you and Aris decided to leave the country?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry,
in
right
2000,
now
yes.
is evoking such emotion
in
me, and it reminds me of the recent Floyd incident that happened with George Floyd, where the policeman had his knee on it, and your stories evoke that similar type of emotion and experience.
Yes, absolutely. From 2007 onwards, Cynthia, together we had understood that things were in a critical state, and within a period of time we needed to flee. And when we fled, we were terrified. We confided in 4 people: Arthur and his wife Nicole, our other friends which were in Johannesburg.
Don't tell names.
I won't mention names. Yeah. But basically I couldn't even tell my parents that we were leaving the country. We threw together 2 or 3 suitcases and we prepared to leave. I went up to Johannesburg. I had to go visit my parents and my grandmother who raised me, and I couldn't tell them the truth that I was leaving. And in my own way, I prepared for them a photograph in a pretty frame, and I gave that to each of them, and that was my going away present without them knowing. And I knew that that's the last time I would see my grandmother for sure, of which she did pass away a year later when I'd come over, and I couldn't even go back to South Africa to a funeral. And she raised me. She was my beloved, I'll be honest with you. So that was very difficult. We've been through a very difficult journey. It's utterly unfair how now, after the fact, after all these years, I mean, the last 12 years or so, we began in hiding, horrified, terrified, afraid. Eventually, when Ari was getting involved with the NPA, trying to bring his story across and to become a witness to help the case and to bring justice about, we were to a slight degree optimistic, but because everything was handled in such a terrible manner, nothing became of it. And now, after all these years, that Ari's name is painted in such a way, it's utterly unfair, It really is. He's been through so much. He's fought this cause for the last 13 years of his life to get nothing back for it, just to put his own life at halt, because psychologically he's always thinking about it. It's affected him in so many ways. And you would think that eventually, if justice comes about, you think, wow, it's a victory. It was worth it. But the fact that it just keeps going and going and going and nothing comes about and nothing changes, it's become devastating. Now, recently, we're optimistic again, enthusiastic. We've got fantastic John on our side, hearing our story and believing in us and trying to help us to bring out the truth, yeah, if I may say. And we're optimistic with people such as yourselves as well, Cynthia. You know, it's wonderful to have people that actually want to hear and want to be on our side instead of feeling so alone, the two of us. You know, it's just been me trying to support him, and what experience do I have to support Aris through all these years? But I've tried. But now to have people such as yourselves involved and put your whole heart out, it's fantastic, and we're very grateful and very blessed.
You say, what experience did you have? Love always finds a way. And you might have think, what was it that you did? Well, you loved your husband. And it's out of that love, there was that confidence. So it wasn't about your experience or anything else. It was about your love.
If I may join in here and say something which is crucial to Shelley and Shelley's feelings. Now, imagine, forget about me, imagine how my wife, how she felt when in 2013, suddenly, Newsweek published an article saying that my girlfriend, that referred in 2008, dumped me, left me, I gone crazy and I tried to kill myself. And that was the reason why Johan Booysen took my gun away and threw me off the police force. There is the woman who dumped me and I killed myself. This is right here. Happily married 2007. The mother of my two kids, here she's on my side talking to me. What is sad is Johan Booysen has called him a slave, that I'm in prison and she's a slave of mine. There she is. It's sad the way evil people can spread such a false information to poison. It's what you refer as bullshit. To bullshit the way out to the community through the media in order to get away with crime. And that is the situation I've seen in South Africa. You know, I haven't seen this in Europe. At least there are laws protecting against such a situation. If somebody writes such rubbish, he has to answer to the authorities. There is a flaw, you know, everybody can say whatever they want to, and that's the end of it. Without any proof, without any evidence, just publish rubbish information and character assassinate anybody who you targeted. That's the part of the media in South Africa. And that needs to change.
Aris and Shelley, I can feel your pain, and I can relate because I've been down that journey. And Shelley, for you, as John had pointed, and I'll speak for myself, is that you can see the hurt your partner's been through, and you in despair because you don't know how to help. And the only way is through the love that you have for him. And that's what propped you up, and your marriage, your family life, and got you going. And I think there's strength in that love, and that's what brought you to this point where you are now, and you're able to have the space to speak about it. My words of encouragement for both of you right now is continue speaking that truth, but continue supporting one another, because you're literally like two pillars holding each other up and propping one another. And it's really, really important, and you've probably noticed it for your children, so that your children do not see this heaviness, this burden that you've been saddled with and carrying, that they know that there's a future and light at the end of the tunnel. To go on to the issue with our media, I can also relate. The media can be so damaging because they're not doing the research of looking at both sides of the story. So they get one part of the story, and that's the story they're going to put out and really put it up in psychedelic lights. And the person who is being affected, no one has asked his opinion or even decided to investigate to see the other side. So I fully agree with you, Ari, that this is where we now need to stop. We need to put our voices forward and really say this stops. Media needs to be as transparent as possible when they're putting out any stories. Over to you, John.
I know that, Aris, you're not probably feeling very charitable towards Jacques Pauw because of the way he basically published false and defamatory claims. What happened to him on the foreshore, my hypothesis is it was because he had learned that the press ombud had ruled in your favor with your complaint and found that he had violated the press code in failing to give you the right to reply. I assume he realized that, well, he's basically been played by Johan Booysen. Now, I've also met Johan Booysen, and I know how people hold him in high regard and affection, because I dare say he has certainly prevented many crimes being committed because of the particular methods he's chosen. But it's not acceptable in a constitutional democracy that the police become a law unto themselves and become actually executioners. In my article, if people can read it, I elaborate. But, when the Bill of Rights and the Constitution was passed, the first case thereafter was whether or not the judicial executions were a violation of the Bill of Rights. And they abolished judicial executions. However, since 1996, my experience has been that we have not abolished the death penalty. We've abolished judicial executions, but what we are seeing, not only in the police, but in the prison system, extrajudicial executions. Prison gangs basically rule the roost because they know they can't be hung. Now, this is not to advocate for judicial execution. It's simply to say that in a situation where we have these wonderfully principled Bill of Rights, it is crucial that we have the criminal justice system playing things exactly by the book, because the end does not justify the means, and there's always going to be potential risks for people being either caught in the crossfire, false arrests, wrongful things, and whatever that criminal who died out and bled out on the floor after that failed robbery, who knows what his story was? Who knows why he would resorted to crime? So there's all these narratives which then get shut down. I really hope and believe that your contribution will be understood in the future as being seminal to the beginning of a change of culture in our media as well as in our criminal justice system, whereby the Bill of Rights is something which is meaningful and not just something we pay lip service to.
If I may comment on this, it made me relate a few principles. I'm a person who grew up outside of South Africa, so my roots, my education, my religious, my family principles were from Greece during the 70s and 80s. I mean, I left Greece when I was 17, so I was still a boy, very conservative boy, and quite a strict conservative family. So we didn't know what violence was. We didn't know what racism was. We didn't have incidents of street battles and shooting and torture by the authorities. That didn't exist in Greece in the 80s. Coming to South Africa in 88, apartheid was still very much alive. Okay, it was at the end of it, but the culture was there. The mentality was still there. So imagine now my sudden reality slap coming from the birth of democracy, which is Greece, undeniable. Nobody can argue this. Greece was the birth of democracy. So in our school, we learn about democracy. We learn about equality. We learn about, anti-racism. And yet I come to a country where suddenly I start my life as an adult. I become an adult in a country where there is heavy racism, discrimination, violence. So that to me was an overwhelmed. Yet I managed to study in South Africa, to incorporate it to the society, to start a successful business. And when I became a South African citizen, I chose to give back to South Africa by becoming a reservist. And I volunteer my services to help my community for free, risking my life. Now, you know, a culture defines the prosper of a country. So I'm referring back to, you mentioned about culture. So in 1994, with elections, you know, South Africa became a democracy. But I fear that South Africa became a democracy in theory, not in practice. So when I see a bunch of, you know, white supremacy leaders of the South African police force at the time controlling a unit, and that unit was committing torture to get information, was committing extrajudicial killing, okay, and that hatred was coming out of this policeman to anything else but white. Treat them in a way that it was dehuman, disrespectfully. I mean, we couldn't even treat like these are animals, are pets. They had totally no disrespect for the human person. To be able to, I mean, I walk into a scene on my Greek Easter, coming from a Greek Easter, celebrating, you know, Jesus Christ, and coming to see a human being bleeding slowly to death, shouting in pain, and to see all those policemen surrounding and talking about a jet ski and get a towel to clean my hands, and why this guy doesn't want to die and step into his stomach to die faster. And when that poor person died, Johan Booysen says, good, he met his maker. How do you allow police authority who's supposed to serve and protect, who the public trusted to serve and protect the society and its community, how do you allow those people to operate like that?
I wanted to invite Arthur, if he would like to comment, because he was also involved there, and he's, maybe just to say for people, he was living in South Africa until a while back, and he now feels open and safe to speak.
Hi, everyone. Yes. My name's Atha Georgiades. I'm a very good friend of Ari. Known him for ages. We've experienced a lot of things together. And I was also his accountant in his business. And it's actually very sad and heartbreaking to hear how he's been dragged through the mud. This honorable person, he's one of the most honorable people that I've met. And for his reputation to be thrown in the mud like that. While I was in South Africa, I used to sort of give him feedback information, what was going on, particularly with the Cato Manor unit and the investigations going on. We've always been close. And since I've immigrated from South Africa with my family, yeah, we've got in touch again. And now we feel that we're in a position where we can share our story about our experiences that we share. I'd see media briefings of write-ups about the Cato unit, about the investigations, and false allegations about him that he was a corrupt businessman.
Okay, so you can corroborate what you said.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, I used to perhaps message and say, "Listen, Ari, this is the story that's going around. What is this nonsense? You know, you had so many accolades in the newspapers of all the good things that you've done to the society, all the high crime units that you managed to, put an end to, and now suddenly, because you've decided to open up about your experiences, they've sort of turned the story around that he was the bad guy rather than the person who's trying to do something good."
Two things I wanted to just ask you that you can give information to. The first one, as Ari's accountant, part of the narrative that General Booysen perpetuated by way of explaining away why Aris left was to say that he stole 300,000 rands from his business partner and had a mountain of debt and therefore had to get out the country or face criminal charges. Now, you were his accountant. Is that true?
Yeah, well, those stories are absolutely false. Just to put you in a perspective, Ari's cash flow was always positive. He always had a large bank account, and everything that he acquired in his business or in his personal life, he always paid it up front in cash. And I always used to tell him, Ari, this doesn't make business sense. Leverage yourself, get loans to operate your business because it makes more financial sense. He says, no, I've brought up cash is best. I don't want to be in debt. And everything was always up front. All his accounts were always up to date. And then even when he left South Africa, he didn't have any debt. So the story where he stole money and he owed people money and he ripped so many people, it's absolutely nonsense.
And Johan Booysen knew that was nonsense too, because he
Of course he knew nonsense, because he knew the lifestyle that Ari lived. And for him to live that kind of lifestyle, it shows that he was a very successful businessman in Durban.
Well, I think that's well dealt with. Now, tell us, because you happen to be together with them celebrating the Easter's.
Yes, I was with them on that day.
Went out with them. Tell us about your.
That's correct. Yeah, we were celebrating Easter that day, and after our function at our community hall, we went back to Ari's house where Johan Booysen, and during that evening he got a call that there was a attempt to break in at some place, and we rushed out with Ari, Johan and myself to the crime scene, where apparently some criminals had been shot in the unit they had tried to rob. We entered the crime scene, and the one area where our witness was in the garage, where a black person had been shot and he was lying on the floor, critically injured. And you can see he was in very much pain. And even though the medics were outside the perimeter, they weren't allowed to attend to the people that had been shot. And his Johan Booysen's logic was they were busy securing the crime scene, and until they had done that, no one was allowed to be attending the people that had been injured.
Arthur also witnessed Johan Booysen tampering with the crime scene and ordering us to pick up the cartridges.
At one stage we were outside. Johan Booysen was like giving instructions to his fellow officers there for what they were needed to do on the crime scene. At one stage, he ordered them to collect certain evidence, which was gun shells. To collect them up, and at one stage I picked up one of the bullet casings, and I said, Ari, do we need to take this one as well? And he said, why are you tampering with the evidence? Put it down. But at a later stage they picked them up anyway. So the crime scenes were manufactured to show that perhaps the police force hadn't used excessive force to tackle a crime scene.
But let me ask Cynthia to actually reflect some of her thoughts.
Thanks. Just to share on my side, what I've noticed with the media, and that's on my experience, I think with Aris and Shelley it was even worse. So our media, I feel, needs to start being far more cognizant of what they put out there, especially regarding whistleblowers.
And I've got a horse that's sitting in the stable that needs a gallop.
Okay, go.
Can I quickly answer from my perspective as a social worker working in the human rights field to help my clients actualize and make their human rights meaningful? So that's where I come at it. The newspapers are simply the first draft of history. And there's a wonderful quote from Phil Graham where he says, he was an editor of the Washington Post, every day newspapers have to drudge to produce a first draft of history that can never be fully completed for a world that we never fully understand. When people start writing books about what's been in the first draft, you expect the book to be a second draft of history that does show a greater completeness and which does ensure that history can be better understood. Ari has got now 3 prominent South African journalists who have bought into what the evidence we're hearing today, a completely false narrative. And I'm starting to get a little bit angry. What do we do when the media becomes contaminated? It's meant to be a safe harbor for whistleblowers, not a place where they get intimidated and abused and have their characters assassinated. So I'm throwing this out as a challenge, and I will give all of my journalist friends the right to reply to this. And I will invite Jacques, Pauw, Anton Harbour, and Jessica Pitchford, who have all written books about Johan Booysen and relating to state capture, to say, please, guys, explain yourself. Because I can't do my job as a social worker if you don't do yours. And you have failed us and failed South Africa's democracy by prematurely buying into a false narrative. Okay. My horse has had a good gallop. Let me put it back in the stable and let you respond and say, how do you feel about it, Aris and Cynthia? Because how do we get the media back into track?
I'm really intrigued and interested to know about the media experience you would have had, Atha.
My core feeling was absolute anger, because they were portraying an image that wasn't accurate at all. I felt that they were taking advantage of the fact that Ari had left the country and that they could possibly use it as an excuse not to get his side of the story. And I feel that there weren't any controls to ensure that the correct story came out. It was being manipulated in a way that they showed Ari as someone who is corrupt, who was on the side of corruption, and he was being paid to act in that certain way. Meantime, the opposite was, in fact, what was the truth.
Yeah. You see, Johan Booysen was, my relationship with him was not bad always. I look at him at the beginning, I was naive. I was in my late 20s. I look at him as a father figure. I idolize his work. When he came and bought a computer from me in the late 90s, I was a Greek person who wanted to be identified in a new country, in a new community, and be embraced. I need to have an identity because I was now a South African citizen, with mixed feelings about what I'm looking in any direction. So I was embraced by the Afrikaner community of Johan Booysen. He took me to his house to assemble his computer and set it up for him. We had dinner. He introduced me to all his family members and his friends. He took me to his church. He introduced me to his office. So it was, in the beginning, it was a clean-cut relationship. I was very excited. It was a new community, new culture. So I was very naive, and I believed everything I've seen in front of me. I had no reasons to doubt it. So now he opened himself to me, and Johan Booysen and his family would tell me things that I didn't need to know about how he operates, about how biased he was towards the other race. I mean, those people hate anything that it was black. And I'm telling you straight, and I know South Africans don't want to hear this. They think it's taboo, but it's the harsh reality. I'm a Greek, and I'm introduced to a community where all I hear, when they refer to Africans, they refer to them with names that it's too embarrassing for me to repeat here. And these are police officers, senior police officers. They hated anything that wasn't white. So now I'm start thinking, hold on a second now, that doesn't make sense. How can you have police officers, but they were supposed to serve and protect, to be so biased against the majority of the population of South Africa, which is not right. It just didn't make sense in my mind. What happened in 2016? A book comes out by Johan Booysen. Okay, now apparently he speaks his truth. That's his truth. Now, was I ever asked for comments? No. Now you find out that the author of the publication will come back to you with a legal reply that, hey, we took reasonable steps. What were those reasonable steps? So you'll find out that you cannot write a book and refer to somebody's name in such a severe way. I mean, he humiliated me in that book without me even having a say. It just, who's going to read this? It's so unfair. It surprised me, makes me frustrated. Nevertheless, you got to look at the facts, which is, who writes a book before a court case has ended? Yeah. And at what purposes? I mean, let's look at the history. Authors wrote books after a charge and a court conclusion. They come out and say, hey, guys, I'm innocent now, I'm writing a book. Now, this guy goes and writes a book in order to apply pressure to the judiciary system and to the public to get public support. So this book was cut and stitched, tailor-suit, I think it's called, to his needs, tailor-made, which was, let's put public pressure to influence politically and judiciary the South African courts, or whatever you're going to call it. And that's what he succeeded, because in essence, he's threatened by me because I have the evidence and I can damage his reputation when it comes to the charges. So what he does is he tasks certain journalists, which are very well known, to character assassinate me because he couldn't kill me. Yeah. They tried, they couldn't. I outsmarted him, I fled the country before he silenced me. So now he knows I'm protecting Europe. He knows he cannot harm me in Europe. So what's the next thing? Let's kill his personality. Let's prove that he's a dodgy, malicious person, but has no credibility. So no court will think twice to use him as a witness. That was a tactic. And that's why that book came out. Now, after that, in 2018, I think, a publication came out. And that's why I said in your article, I made a comment, I have no problem speaking to international journalists which are professional enough to present a balanced story and investigate with a non-biased attitude. So when international journalists investigate, they all believe a narrative. They're not stupid. They're spoken to Booysen. They asked Booysen to produce evidence. He had none. All he had was rumors. I introduced and sent to this journalist tons of hard evidence. And there were publications by Euronews, there was publication by Al Jazeera, there were publications and documentaries made by Greek channels. And yet in South Africa, when I come forward to journalists and say, hey guys, you got it wrong, allow me to speak, but they don't want to know. They turn the other way. Why do they have to hide? That's my question. What do they have to hide? And why are they afraid to present my version of the story? That puzzles me in South Africa, about the South African media. So then we go to Jacques Pauw's article. These are the facts. He uses one source and one source only. That source has no evidence. So now, Jacques Pauw deliberately approved that deliberately chose not to contact me. He didn't want to. He tried to cover legally his acts by saying, well, I Googled the niggas and I couldn't find him. I mean, who Googles somebody to get contact him when he knows who my previous attorney was? Yeah. Which he has mentioned in his book, Julia Knight. So he chooses not to contact me on purpose because Johan Booysen has instructed him not to contact the niggas because it'll be damaging for his reputation. It's simple. So now you have Jacques Pauw saying that I'm a dodgy businessman who was thrown out of the police force. Hold on, mate. Come talk to me. I'll give you a letter which shows that the South African police force basically begging me not to resign. Basically telling me, hey, man, you've done such a good work. Show us, tell us the information we want to know, and you won't go away. we have a letter handwritten, dictated by Johan Booysen, helping me to send a letter to the director Kennedy so we can make the all misunderstanding go away. Why were Johan Booysen going to trouble? And Shelley is a witness to that because, if I remember correctly, she typed the letter that Booysen dictates. So why would Johan Booysen go to the trouble? She reminded me that, John, I didn't even know it. Why would Johan Booysen go to the trouble to dictate a letter after my alleged suspension to make the whole problem go away if he didn't hold me in the force, like he stated, under oath? There are so many lies that they fed to the public. Then after that, 3 days after I leave South Africa, I get 3 SMS from Johan Booysen, say to me, and I have those SMSs, they are indisputable forensic evidence because they are stored in my original South African SIM card. Nobody can argue with them. From Johan Booysen's cell phone number to my South African roaming cell phone number. There is a sort of confusion there with the ombudsman, if you remember, John.
Yes. Okay.
So, because obviously for 2-3 weeks after I left South Africa, I still had my roaming South Africa until I get a new Greek number. So Booysen now, I don't want to speak to him and I try to stall him because I'm afraid of him. Why do I am afraid of him? Because the house I was living in, my country house, my family home, is where Booysen was my guest a couple of years ago. Johan Booysen and his family had stayed on those houses. So he knew my physical location. He knew my home numbers there. They haven't been changed, still same number. My parents' numbers. So he SMSed me and he says, don't despair. You've been so good to my family. I will always treasure you, something like that. I will look after your interest in South Africa. I'm going to come to Greece and visit you, have some beers. So his narrative, the reality to his narrative are left and right. He's lying. It's what I call bullshit.
Okay, let me explain the bullshit story. There's a Greek word which makes it sound less impolite and more professional. It's called skubalon. There's a book actually written, it's called On Bullshit, and he says,
we're here with Princeton University Professor of Philosophy Emeritus, Harry Frankfurt, whose most recent book on bullshit. What is your theory of bullshit? What is bullshit?
Well, it consists in a lack of concern for the difference between truth and falsity. The motivation of the bullshitter is not to say things that are true or even to say things that are false, but he's serving some other purpose. And the question of whether what he says is true or false is really irrelevant to his pursuit of that ambition.
And you actually find bullshitters in some way more reprehensible than liars.
The liar knows what the truth is, and he's concerned with trying to keep people away from the truth. This in itself shows a certain respect for the value of truth and the importance of truth. Whereas the bullshitter doesn't care at all. His stance is a greater threat to respect and concern for the truth than the liar's is. The liar wants to substitute for the truth something that he knows or believes to be false. So the difference between truth and falsity is very important to him, whereas to the bullshitter it's not important at all. That's why I think that there's a more insidious threat to concern and respect for truth and bullshit than in lying.
Right. No,
the difference between the liar and the bullshitter is the liar still acknowledges that there is a truth and tries to distort it, whereas the bullshitter tries to dismiss the concept of truth entirely. And the only purpose is, can they persuade? So they will have this very malleable way in which facts and incidences and propaganda will be used in order to get people to believe something, even against the evidence. And I have this idea of, on the one extreme, you've got this aletheia, the truth, and the other extreme, this skubalon. And how do we then move our medias to calibrate it so that it's getting towards the aletheia? But Cynthia, you want to make some comment. I see you nodding. So that sounds like I've got one supporter.
No, there is that spectrum of trying to find the truth and the interpretation of it. So it's just ironic when you say we are whistleblowers, that we're speaking something and we're shouting it out. But my sense of a whistleblower is that we are being strangled because we're trying so hard to speak. We're trying so hard to blow that whistle. There is no sound because everyone around us is closing that, strangling our voice, our throats. We can't speak. The whistle we are blowing is almost muffled, so that no sound is coming out. So it's so ironic. To me, it's like an oxymoron where you're saying whistleblowing, but no one's listening, no one's hearing, and no one's taking action. So I can fully relate. I have a question for you as you were speaking, and it's, are you feeling safe right now? Are you safe in Greece?
When I returned to South Africa, I returned to Greece. Because there were no charges against the unit. For a period of time, up until 2011, when the investigation started in the unit, I felt safe. I mean, I managed to get away with it. Booysen in the unit, all they knew was that probably they suspected that I was the person who had uploaded on YouTube some videos, because it's very important for the South African public to know that in contrast to what Johan Booysen and Jacques' narrative was, I became a whistleblower the moment I decided to obtain evidence back in South Africa. From 2004, when I risked my life to pretend I was calling my mother in order to take 2-3 video clips of the actually torture at the unit, that's the time when I became a whistleblower. There's a study about it. A whistleblower is an active, proactive, and passive whistleblower. I'm a proactive whistleblower, just like you. We came out. In my case, I investigated through what I learned in the police force as a detective. No, I wasn't an official detective, but I worked in detective unit, so I learned. And the fact that I was in computers, I learned to investigate. So I used that skills to obtain evidence in secrecy. And those evidence, the moment you obtain those evidence, you become a whistleblower. After that, so at the time I risked my life directly. Now, we left South Africa. For a period of years, up until 2011, I was relaxed because I knew that the threat is over now.
I believe, going through it with you, once we moved from Oropo to our first home, then you relaxed.
Yes.
You were very much in fear.
Yes. While I was in my country, my family home, the first 6 months, I was in fear. Okay. We were in a mountain, horrified because I had nowhere else to stay, and Booysen knew my location. So I was, and that's why I stole Johan Booysen. I was a bit friendly, replied to some SMS because I wanted to stall them. Say, okay, let bygones be bygones. I'm not in Greece. I'm not threat to you.
Yeah.
When we moved, I changed my South African number to a Greek number. I moved to my first flat. Then nobody knew what I was. I carried on my life. Shelley fell pregnant. In 2011, we had our child. So imagine now that I've got a pregnant wife, and suddenly all hell breaks loose. Because I found out from a YouTuber on my channel where I have uploaded that information about Cato Manor, which I did in 2009, just a few months after I left.
Yes.
That's very crucial information. Jacques said on Daily Maverick that I only turned on Johan Booysen and his men in 2011. That's a lie. And I have proved that. Yet the ombudsman choose not to follow that information. Deliberate. So up until 2011, in Greece, I felt safe. I upload stuff on the YouTube. I sent on CNN, on Al Jazeera. I sent emails to government officials in South Africa. Nothing happened. So I said to myself, I've done anything in my power. There's nothing more I can do. It cost my life savings, quite a few of it. It cost my beloved South Africa. I mean, I love South Africa. If we felt safe, I can assure you now, I will pick up my family and return to South Africa tomorrow. That's how much I miss South Africa. But I can't. I'll never be safe.
Well, hang on. And I'm referring to, again, Mosila Motepu's book called Uncaptured. And she describes her ordeal. I mean, it's a different context. She's talking about corporate finance and huge amounts of money at stake, all sorts of things going, and how she gets falsely charged and arrested and harassed and suspended, and how her health starts failing her. But she feels vindicated because eventually the tide started to turn, and even to the point where she gets a phone call from President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now, in the hypothetical possibility that Cyril Ramaphosa gets to see this video and phones you to say, as the police try to persuade you not to resign, that he tries to persuade you to come back to South Africa. Shelley, how would you feel about that?
It's quite interesting how you say that, because if I remember, as President Cyril Ramaphosa was elected, I said to Ari, he's got this image, and everybody has the same opinion, that he's a very fair man and he'll be a very fair president. I said, send him an email, maybe he'll hear you. And he actually sent a letter.
I sent 3 letters with different emails, but I never got a reply.
So with regard to that speculation, it would be fantastic, of course. Imagine that Ari's name is vindicated and the whole South Africa knows the truth. We love the country. All the time we consider the idea that one day we could return to South Africa. I mean, my family's there. I have a home to stay in.
Even for holidays.
On the beach, on the seaside. It's beautiful.
To get our kids to see South Africa. I mean,
your son's just turned 10. Your daughter's what, 6? 7 now. So they've never been here.
No, never. It's one of my dreams to bring my children to my country, to go and see the safari and the Big Five and experience what we experienced growing up in such a beautiful country.
John, the reason why I didn't have kids in South Africa was because I knew how the unit worked. It's exactly the weak link. If they want to control you, they will control you by not coming after you, but coming after the family. So there is no way. That's why, I had children at 40. And coming back to Cynthia's question, after I turned to the NPA, and the NPA came and asked me for help, suddenly all hell broke loose. If it wasn't for Amnesty International to support me, to guide me, we had a protocol. We were changing homes every 2 years, Cynthia. Every 2 years with a newborn. You know how difficult it is, especially in Europe, which is extremely expensive to relocate, to pay down deposits. It was expensive. It was difficult. Every 2 years we relocated because of direct and indirect threats. The NPA had instructors. These are dangerous people. Stay away from the media. Stay away from them. They had a network. It's a problem. So we follow instructions. And that's why I went silent. Sunday Times, because I was the source, ran the story initially. Then things turned ugly.
Yeah.
And I had to be silenced. It was a documentary of Al Jazeera, which I said, it must be said. And they came in complete secrecy. We had to sign letters of confidentiality with them so they don't reveal locations. We had to move outwards. So there was a protocol followed. I was in constant fear. When I was going to an interview, I had to wear my bulletproof vest. It was sad, the situation. All this changed. Then there came the books. The way that the media was projecting me. So it was one thing after the other.
Yeah.
It was sad how the NPA misused me. The fact that they went to court and they lied about an affidavit, which at the time I never gave. Prior to 2016, I never even signed an affidavit. Those people played me. All I did was came out and said, guys, there is a problem in this country by the police force. I witnessed, as a reservist, human rights violations, torture, and crime scene tampering. That's all I said. This was my story. Now, if they choose to turn it to their own conspiracy for their own political agenda, that had nothing to do with me. My intent was to help my community come to the bottom of that, because I witnessed it firsthand. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I'm the only policeman from Cato unit which came forward to reveal information. I believe had more policemen had fled the country, they would have become whistleblowers. But they know if they open their mouth the day. I left the country because I'm a Greek citizen. I'm protected by European laws. So I can talk now. I'm not fear. John helped me, and the press ombudsman process helped me indirectly to find my strength. I'm not afraid anymore. I've got a face, I've got a name, and I challenge them to answer for the crimes.
My interest in wanting to see you back here is not just because I want to go and watch the Sharks rugby match with the two of you, because I remember Shelley Ann was telling me you're one of the Sharks girls way back in the days and all that sort of thing. It's because of your experience and policing skills and all the rest. I've just got back from Wild Coast. Now, I don't go to the Wild Coast on holiday. I go there as a social worker, and I was interviewing the surviving families of 3 people who had lost their lives on the Wild Coast because of that old Kolobeni mining company. And from 2003 was the first one, no arrest, no prosecution. 2008 was the next one, no arrest, no prosecution. 2015, the third one, no arrest, no prosecution. 2016, when Bazooka Khadebe was shot and killed, no arrests, no prosecution. So part of me is saying, we need your commitment as a policeman to come back to this country and basically do the job so that we can ensure that those criminals are brought to justice. It was, just yesterday, sitting in the room with Bazooka Khadebe's son. He is still having harassment from police and difficulties, and it could be so easy to actually find out who his killers were. With a couple of, maybe a reward given and things like this. And you just think that there is what they call a learned helplessness in the police and prosecuting authorities. Hopefully it's changing in the prosecuting authorities, but in the police services, there is a need for people with your skills.
I have a hypothesis, and this is very crucial. Why did I make such a resistance of the South African media? And I have the answer to that. I'm a whistleblower that came forward to damage the reputation of a key witness at the Zondo Commission. Think about it. Johan Booysen spoke at the Zondo Commission.
The Zondo Commission and the other Commission, yes.
I'm not here to speak about the state capture. I'm here to solely say I witnessed atrocities committed prior to 2008 by my unit.
Yeah.
So now, I believe that if I'm proven right, then Johan Booysen and that unit are discredited, and they will be discredited as witnesses at the Zondo Commission. And that is damaging for a political cause. It's collateral damage. So that's where the balance are going left or right. So certain politicians, certain journalists don't want to hear the story of Danikas because it causes damage to the narrative, which is, Johan Booysen being a victim of the state capture, which to me, it was total rubbish. But anyway, we'll get to that.
What we call skubalon in Greek. But anyway, one of our other sort of fair witnesses, Nolene, is on. Do you want to have some comment, Nolene? You've met Nolene before. She's one of the people that tries to keep me out of trouble.
It's lovely to meet you, Cynthia. I have such admiration for what you've done. And Aris and Shelley, it just really worries me, and it has for some time. I actually asked John to send you something over Easter, some very beautiful music that was done by the Ndlovu Youth Choir that's touched me so deeply. And for whatever reason, I actually felt that you needed to hear this. I have a strong feeling that there has to be some kind of healing for you to be able to come back here. Even if it is for a holiday at some stage, You know, I live in Cape Town. I mean, you could come in and move around very freely, stay in our house here, and people wouldn't know you here for a while. I completely agree with what John says, but after all this time of, you know, anguish on your part and on your and Shelley's part and so on, that to see yourself having a productive role in our country again, does it almost seem impossible?
Okay. Hi, John. Thanks for the event and thanks for the colleagues. We've listened to the stories. They ring resonance with many other stories, and they must be strong, and we'll keep an eye. I think there's a lot of work being done to make sure that there's better protection for whistleblowers. But I will engage with John after this session. Thank you. Tipanyane from the Human Rights Commission.
Thank you, Tseliso. Tseliso Tipanyane was one of the guys who helped me with the Kolobeni story to ensure that the media did serve its purpose to ensure that human rights became actualized. Thank you, Tseliso. That's really encouraging.
Thank you, John.
Thanks. I have a different path now for me, is that I feel I'm drawn to help other whistleblowers because of what I've suffered. That you find that you've gone to your own peer group in your own organization and no one wants to listen. Your family's there to support you. And then you reach out to other whistleblowers and you find that they've suffered the same. That it's so debilitating, which puts you in a place where you feel as if you've been slapped around, you've been abused. Obviously, it's not, you can't see the physical bruises, but you feel it in your entire body, in your mind, in your heart. And so I can resonate with Aris and Shelley on this. Aris and Shelley will find the right time. Their heart is still here. If they're still so passionate about South Africa, that door will open for you. And I found, for me, one is you need to have a path of forgiveness on the one side. The other side is that there needs to be the vindication. And I think you're on the path of vindication right now because you need to tell your story. You need to be able to get it out. Not everyone is seeing the full story. There's probably part of our country supporting Johan Booysen, the other probably doubting you. And so that story needs to come out so people can make up their minds, but it doesn't even matter for you. What's important is going to be once you've been able to tell your story and you feel that vindication. So the first part was with your recent case with the ombudsman. There may be others avenues that will bring out. If I just go back to mine, my first was actually I never got to a disciplinary hearing. I was charged, I never got to one. Because SA just wasn't organized. Every time I appeared, they were not there, so you couldn't have it. The same happened with CCMA. My vindication came when I was able to speak at the State Capture Commission. And I cannot tell you the release I felt. It was this burden off my shoulders. I was excited. I was happy. I actually drove all night to Free State to teach yoga. So, I mean, that's how I didn't feel tired. I had all this energy. You're going to get to that state. And it starts with small steps. This is one of the first steps by speaking out. The other step you need to take, probably parallel with it or afterwards, you will decide, your body, your mind, your soul will tell you when it's right, where you're going to have to forgive. Because to release that anger, what you're feeling for what happened in Cato Manor, your whole unit, the people that didn't support you and speak out, and specifically Johan Booysen with his whole entourage of allegations together with the media. It will be slow, but it's your path that you're going to need to take. And once you've done that, I think you will find the right time and the doors will be open for you in South Africa.
Well, you know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing the possibility of Nolene in Cape Town with her music therapy and Cynthia here in Joburg getting together to give shape to a a process and a program that combines yoga and meditation and music as a therapeutic aid to support people who are seeking to speak their truth on their path of truth giving and truth seeking in terms of that Aletheia, did I pronounce it right? Aletheia process of the truth being reality. Nolene being a musician of some distinction.
Amazing. I know that I'm wanting to meet up with Cynthia, that's for sure. But I really felt just said, Cynthia, about the telling of our story, that there are going to be those who still, find it more comfortable to believe Johan Booysen and so on, and that the outcome of that is actually not important. I think that is hugely important. That is the telling of the story and the telling of the truth that is going to bring the freedom for you, Ari, and Shelley.
The closing chapter for me that brings closer to me is the fact that I'm now busy as we speak opening a non-government organization in Greece. I'm actually bringing blueprint for free speech in Greece, and I will be the executor of that. So I'm building an NGO to help whistleblowers in Southeast Europe. And that to me, it's closer because whatever I encountered the last 20 years of my life in South Africa, being a whistleblower, the way I've been punished about being a whistleblower, I can now use that experience and knowledge to help other whistleblowers. And that is my closing point in my life, the closing chapter when it comes to whistleblowing as South Africans.
You're only 50, you got a lot more chapters in your life, eh? You're only 50.
Yeah, but 20, half of that I spent it trying to help this situation with South Africa.
Do you have any regrets?
John, no, I don't. If it happened to me now, I'll probably have done the same thing. Okay, now I'm older, I have children. Fear of something happening to my family might be a catalyst to my decision to become a whistleblower. But what happens today, we have in Europe legislation and we have anonymous protection mechanisms, which I helped actually design in Europe. That's very important to me. So if it was today, I will still do it, but I will have protection mechanisms to support whistleblowers in my favor. In 2008, I never had this. So no regrets. I will have done it again.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. Really?
If I may say something.
Yes.
With thought to Nolene's comment about getting freedom eventually, it makes me think of The Long Walk to Freedom by our beloved Nelson Mandela, that any journey that is difficult eventually will have its outcome, its truth, and it inspires me right here, right now, and I hope it inspires Ari to have faith and to keep strong and to keep walking to get his freedom.
Yeah.
And as to what you were saying about regrets, I had no choice if I would do it or not. I had to follow my husband, love of my life, and I would do it again tomorrow. So yeah, to freedom, to truth, and to have faith. That's how I feel.
Cynthia, do you have any regrets?
I don't have any regrets either. So I would do it again today. I with Aris totally agree that it's the truth. It's doing the right thing. It's standing up for honesty, for integrity. I agree.
Yes.
Well, folk, now you can see why I have absolutely no regrets about choosing social work as a career. The pay isn't good, but the fringe benefits are out of this world. Now that's because of the privilege of working with people like Aris and Shelley Ann and Cynthia and others. And they've shared with me stories which really have given me such encouragement to know that we're on the right track in this country if we actually ensure that whistleblowers are not treated like pariahs. They are brave people who've gone out on a limb, and they've taught me that's where the blossoms are growing. The Franciscan priest Father Richard Raw from the Center of Action and Contemplation teaches that the deeper truths tend to manifest to those working on what he calls the edge of the inside. To better understand reality, one needs to go and listen to people on the margins and boundaries, especially people like Aris, who have been pushed out of a country, who are now living in exile. They've got a perspective to share that will help us see both the wood and the trees. We need people like that to help us come to greater consciousness and awareness, and to have our eyes open to the reality, the Aletheia, in a way that people at the center of power and wealth just simply can't grasp. That's because for them reality is malleable. I'm reminded of that famous saying by Upton Sinclair, it's hard to understand something when your paycheck depends on you not understanding it. Well, if you're not getting much of a paycheck, truth tends to manifest itself in other ways, and there's a new currency that you start working with. So people with wealth and power, truth becomes malleable and reality becomes warped. In the worst extremes, it tends towards scubalon. Well, in my article, I examine the whole saga of the injustices that Aris has had to suffer to stifle his truth by looking at how bias works, not just confirmation bias, which is where we look for evidence that confirms our own assumptions, but other forms of bias that another great spiritual writer, in fact, a colleague of Richard Raw, Brian McLaren, has unpacked. He talks about complexity bias, how the brain prefers a simple lie over a complex truth. Community bias, how our need to belong will tend to condition us to putting tribe over truth. And the one which really needs no further explanation for those who have been watching Donald Trump, confidence bias, how we are prone to believe the bold lie over a hesitant truth. And my job really, to think about it as a social worker, is to support whistleblowers who are feeling hesitant to find the confidence so they can speak a bold truth over the bold lies. Well, you can read all about that in my article, and I hope it's helpful. Another thought which occurred to me reflecting on this conversation is that everyone perhaps has an inner whistleblower inside wanting to come out. We must all in some way or another be aware of a wrongdoing which needs to be named, unmasked and confronted. And the experience I've had in counselling people who have let their inner whistleblower come out, it's been emancipatory. And they tell me that as you go out on a limb to embrace that ever larger, more complex reality, they're not actually alone. That there are other people who have done that. And you find yourself in a solidarity with other truth seekers and tellers, and enables you to see blossoms blooming and overcome fear. Which brings me back to this symbol, which if you followed my YouTube videos, you'll see it recurs. When it's animated, it represents what I think is the key to unlocking your inner whistleblower. See the two lines of infinity, which I interpret as the inward movement of conscience, contemplation, meditation, reflection, however you want to put it, and the outward movement of consciousness, action, public engagement. I'm convinced that this mudslide of corruption, human rights abuses and social injustice will be rolled back as more and more people just simply undertake their journey of transcendence that leads to a true, sustainable transformation. Well, in my next dialogue, I will examine that with somebody who perfectly illustrates the importance of transcendence as an integral part of transformation, Mosila Motepu. Her book is now just hot off the press, and to go back to Upton Sinclair's famous quote, she proves in her story that although it may be hard to understand something if you're receiving an enormous paycheck, it is not impossible. She tells of how she was able to escape from the golden handcuffs that her former boss at Trillion, Eric Wood, put on her to play along with the whole Gupta state capture conspiracy. And she tells how she found herself, how she uncaptured herself, and how this has led to a whole new sense of reality for her. So if your inner whistleblower is stirring and you're aware of some wrongdoing, you've got information to share. Besides reading her book and Mandy Wiener's book, The Whistleblowers, there's another one, Cynthia Stimpel's book will be coming out in a couple of months. So there's a whole new genre of literature which I think is going to be so helpful. In support of that process, I'm not the only social worker or helping professional there to support you. There's social workers that I can refer you to if you want to come on board to this very humanizing process. And then the plan after that is to have another conversation with Aris and Shelley, but with a bunch of journalist friends in the room with them. And I would like to invite the journalists that I've been giving a hard time, Jacques Pauw, Jessica Pitchford and Anton Harbour, and to give you the right to reply, to share your stories, to respond to these adverse criticisms, because we're all on a journey, and it's not about getting things wrong, it's about how we put things right. Or who knows, I might even, in a future one, have a conversation with Johan Booysen. I did meet him, by the way, before he knew that I was working with Aris, and he didn't know that, but I would like to have another conversation with him. It's going to be a bit different, but I do think it's important for us to go against our inclination to withdraw and to try and find ways of keeping engaged, because everybody's got a story to share. And I think the extent to which we allow ourselves to be isolated and cut off, so are we prone to self-deception. Finally, one of my favorite quotes to take away from another priest, this time a Jesuit, Father Anthony de Mello. He said, "It is common to oppose a truth, but impossible to resist a story." So, what is the whistleblower story that you have to share?